Today in this video we will explain how to find an absolute maximum and minimum values. Before we start explaining how to find the absolute minimum, how we will find the absolute minimum and absolute maximum in an open interval or a closed interval, what's meant by an absolute maximum and what's meant by an absolute minimum. So for example, if we have f of c is an absolute maximum, it means f of c it's greater or equal any f of x in the question. So it is the highest point in this question. For another example, if we have f of c is an absolute minimum, it means f of c is less than or equal to f of x, any f of x, any point. So we can say f of x is any point in the graph. F of x here is any point in the graph. Now the problem is we need to pay attention if the given interval is an open interval or a closed interval. If the interval is closed interval, for example, closed interval from a and b, we should include while we are testing, we should include f of a and f of b. We will see that in the question. So absolute maximum, it means the highest point. No, we don't have any point in the graph that is highest than this point. And absolute minimum, it's the lowest point in the graph. So let's take this example. Locate an absolute extrema. What is meant by absolute extrema? Absolute extrema, it means absolute maximum or minimum of the function f of x equal x squared minus 9 in the interval minus infinity to infinity. Part B, locate any absolute extrema for the same question on the interval, open interval, -3, and C, locate any absolute extrema, it means maximum or minimum, for the same function for the interval, closed interval, -3 and 3. So we will have three parts for this question or this example. So we will start with the absolute maximum and the absolute minimum on the open interval -∞. If we look to the figure, it's a parabola. It's a parabola like that. It extended from this side and this side since the interval is open interval. Now we are searching for the highest point, which we usually call it absolute maximum. So since the graph continue increasing up and from both sides, so there is no absolute maximum for this function in the interval -∞. So in this interval, -∞, there is no highest point because the graph will keep increasing from both sides. So there is no limit for that. Now we are searching for the lowest point, which is, we usually call it lowest point, which we call it absolute minimum. So if you look here, the lowest point here, this is the lowest point here. It is f of 0. So lowest point, it is the lowest point f of 0, which is equal -9, which is equal to -9 in the interval -∞. So this is the smallest, the lowest point for this function. So again, if we look, this function, the quadratic function, x squared minus x squared minus 9 in the open interval -∞. If we look to this curve, it has a absolute minimum. This is the lowest point, but since it keep elongating up and -∞ and +∞ are not included in the interval, no absolute maximum. So this graph in the first interval, it has only absolute minimum. Now let's check part B. We are talking now about same function f of x, which is x squared minus 9 on the open interval. So now open interval, -3 and 3, both endpoints, -3 and 3 are not included in the interval. They are not in the interval. So because it's an open interval, this is open. It's an open interval. So we can't find, if we look to the figure, the graph starts from here, continue, and 3 and -3 is open. They are not included. So if we look to the maximum, if we search for the maximum value, so f of x, which is x squared minus 9, has no absolute maximum in the interval, open interval, -3 and 3, because we can't find a highest point for this graph. So there is no absolute maximum. Now for the absolute minimum, this is the lowest point. It is included in our graph. So f of 0, which is equal to -9, is the absolute minimum in the interval -3, 3, the open interval. So this is the lowest point in the graph. Now let's again, we need to pay attention in the interval. The endpoints of the interval should be included. When the interval is open, both of them are not included, so we can't include them in the interval. So the absolute minimum of this function is -9. So it means, in other words, our graph will go down until the point -9. The graph can't go down beneath -9. So this is what's meant by the absolute minimum. Now part C, if we read it, locate any absolute extrema, it means maximum and minimum, for the same function f of x equal x squared on the closed interval -3 and 3. So the closed interval -3 and 3, this is a closed interval. So both endpoints, -3 and 3 are included in the interval. So now we can see that if we look to the highest point, the maximum value that this function can reach. So again, absolute minimum or absolute minimum or maximum, we are searching for the y values. So if we check the boundaries, f of -3 from the graph, it's 0, and f of 3 is 0. So this is the highest point where the graph can reach. So f of x, which is x squared minus 9, has absolute maximum at 2 points, which is f of -3 and at the point f of 3, and the absolute maximum is 0. So this is the absolute maximum in the closed interval, which is very important here, the closed interval, -3 and 3. Now the lowest point, so f of x, which is x squared minus 9, has absolute minimum at f of 0, which is this point, which is -9, in the interval -3 and 3. So this is our, again, so here, because it's a closed interval from -3 to 3, so they are closed interval, they are included. So our graph starts from here until here. This is the maximum and this is the minimum. But since there is 2 points in our graph, so we will take them. So 0 is the maximum point value that we can reach, and -9 is the smallest value that we can reach.